I think this applies to most women and probably most people, is that we wait for too long to kind of start talking about what we do. We wait for far too long. We wait for perfection. We say, let this become bigger, let this become better, let this become a unicorn, let it become this. We are constantly waiting to kind of start talking about it because we are thinking that, am I being loud? Am I being boastful? Am I not, so some of that. So I think getting rid of my inhibitions around some of that was very, very important.
You're watching Not Just Auntie with Suman Adepalli.
Our new guest on Not Just Auntie is Shweta, an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad with 20 years of work experience in the healthcare and data science industry primarily. From becoming a commercial director at a major firm in Thailand to a series of entrepreneurial stints, Shweta's journey has been anything but ordinary. As a senior corporate leader, she has been a consultant to CEOs and built several organizations ground up. But what was her biggest learning experience was her time at Helios, where she was denied her rightful share as a co-founder. Not someone to dwell on setbacks, she quickly learned from this experience and went on to create new opportunities for herself. Build My Story is Shweta's third entrepreneurial venture based on her strong and compelling communication skills. Shweta is not only a passionate blogger and columnist, she is a trained storyteller who is constantly upskilling herself. Outside of work, Shweta is an auntie to the friends of her 15-year-old daughter, her nieces and nephews.
You're watching Not Just Auntie with Suman Adepalli.
Hi Shweta, welcome to the show. I thank you so much for being so enthusiastic and such a willing participant from the first call I made to you about this concept.
Hey, it's my privilege. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a great thing to do, but it's also my privilege that you chose to think I'm worthy of the conversation. So thank you for asking me.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You've lived in 3 countries, traveled to 13 countries across 5 continents, and love to make friends with people across the globe. And I'm asking you because I'm like a tree. I don't like to move out of Mumbai, and I can't bear to, think that I will be moving away for anything more than a holiday. So, what is your advice for people like me?
So I think that number 13 would have gone up. I think that would have been in my blog. It would now be probably, it should have gone up to, I think, 15, 16 now. I don't know exactly. And while I've lived in 3 countries, I've also lived in 9 cities, 6 cities in India and 7 cities in India and 2 cities elsewhere. And what can I say? Honestly, I don't know if you've read, I wrote about this in one of my Thrive articles as well about sequoias, banyans and bougainvilleas. And I don't judge. I mean, people who live in the same place obviously reap other benefits. You build very deep roots and very deep bonds, which people like us, nomads, don't really sort of get to benefit. But I think, I don't know if I would be talking to you today if I had stayed in one place and done one thing. I have had a very, very interesting and diverse life because of those experiences. And it's opened up my horizons in ways and my mind in ways that I wouldn't have imagined it would, right? So I don't really want to give anybody advice because everybody chooses what is good for them. But I do think be open to adventure is what I would say, right? Be open to adventure, be open to life, let life happen to you and go with the flow of it. So in any of these places, I didn't actively choose it, right? I was joining my husband in both places. It's not like I said, Acha, I want to experience living abroad. Those are just things that happened. And in the first case, I did it willingly. The second case, I actually resisted going to Thailand quite a bit. But I think it was one of my richest experiences in terms of both opening up my mind and in terms of professionally, otherwise. And so, yeah, I think just be open to life and be open to adventure is what I would say.
That's great advice, and I think what you said when you resisted it was as the trailing wife. Like if you didn't want to go, and I just want to ask a short question on this. This was not intended in the questionnaire that I shared with you, but how do you feel about being a trailing wife? Like, how does it impact the careers of women across the globe? Because see, even for me, if my husband is moving, I would move, irrespective of how it impacts my career. And largely that's the decision women take. So do you feel this is one of the reasons why women are not in top management or in CXO positions today?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think you can generalize like that. There are um, people make choices for their own families, what is best for them, right? Um, do women lose out because they are trailing spouses? I think anybody who's a trailing spouse does have a disturbed career in general, right? Having said that, I think I've learned to look at those experiences as a privilege, right? Because my corporate career, the richest phase of my corporate career happened in Thailand, right? And if I hadn't moved, I would never have had that experience, right?
So in short, be open. Like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and the thing that I like, the ability to sort of go with the flow and reinvent myself would never have happened if I had not done that, right? The need to network came because I was outside of my comfort zone. In India, everyone knew an IIM degree, and everyone you kind of expect to be treated like royalty. But you step out of the country and you realize really how useless that tag is. So in terms of just learning to put myself out there, talking to strangers, getting new opportunities, finding myself new opportunities. I didn't go on job transfers. I had the option to. In both times, the current employers that I was working with gave me the choice of moving with a job. But I guess I'm just crazy, right? So I chose not to do that. I was like, ये तो बहुत boring है यार, नहीं मुझे वहाँ जाके कुछ करना है. And I paid price for that adventure, right? Obviously, if I had like the first time when I was moving to the US, I was with the company called Tata Internet Services Limited. And one of the early founders of the company who was no longer with the company, when I told him I'm moving, he said, hey, do you want to join TCS and move with TCS? And I said, nahi yaar, mere ko techie nahi banna hai. So I said that, listen, I mean, I got the option to, but in my head, I was like, I've realized I'm just a very adventurous soul. And I sort of said no to that. I said, let me go there and figure what happens. And again, that year was a very, very rich year, but it was a gap year, right? I mean, I tried to get work, but it taught me so much in terms of how to network. I volunteered. I discovered that I can actually love doing stuff without getting paid for it. I traveled 17 states in 1 year. I discovered a love for trekking. So, I mean, it enriched me as a human being a lot. And honestly, at various points in my life, when I look back, I've always somehow chosen experiences that would sort of enrich me, the human being, as opposed to build my resume. And there is a price to be paid for that, because companies don't value the human being; they value the resume, right? So there is a trade-off. But I've also realized that I have made those choices very consciously, and while I was making them, I was aware of what I was doing. It wasn't accidental. Even when I moved to Thailand, I was with MarketRx for 5 odd years, and I was the EA to the CEO. And he gave me the option of, hey, you're anyway working. I was already working from home in Thailand, in Bombay, and the company was based in Gurgaon. He said, what's the big deal? It's just a time lag, and you can continue to do what you do out of Thailand.
That's wonderful. Wonderful.
So I had that option. Again, I turned that option down because I was bored of working from home, right? And I was bored of working from home, and I moved. So yeah, there is obviously a price to be paid for in terms of linearity. But it's also at some level a choice. Like when I was in Thailand, I was managing a business of 30 crores. I was managing the entire IQVIA. I was a commercial director there. And while there was a CEO, I was a regional rock star. I could have continued, and I doubt if they would have not given me the country manager's job a year or two down the line if I wanted it. But being that close to the country manager's role, I realized I didn't want it. It was terribly boring. It didn't lack. It was a nice title, and I've sometimes thought about it and said, did I make a mistake? Because, having that on your resume would have been nice for sure. But it didn't appeal to me. What that job entailed, the content of that job entailed, and how I would spend my day was not exciting to me, right?
Okay.
So it was also that. So at some level, you have to own up to who you are, and I think I didn't know it at that. I didn't have the words for it, and all of that has obviously come with wisdom and hindsight. Is that I realize I'm a startup person.
So
Right?
no predictability, in short.
So yeah, I realized that I liked the rough and tumble of. So I had a double whammy, right? One was I was a trailing spouse. The second was I've always also been in startups and I've been an entrepreneur, and those two are a terrible combination, right? Like if you want to be a trailing spouse, have a steady job, because that takes you, or work for a large corporation that takes you, that and there are people who do that. They're able to seamlessly transfer and move cities and countries following their spouse because their companies enable it.
That's true.
Okay, and so you can have a pretty good career as a trailing spouse if you choose to be in a large corporate. And entrepreneurship requires rootedness fundamentally. It requires you to be in one place. It requires to be in one space and time. And so again, there was that. So I think those two together are not the best combination for career, a steady continuity of any sort. Having said that, I doubt if I would go back, if you were to give me the opportunity and say, okay, go back and do this and do that. I don't know if I would change anything. I think it's been a fun ride.
Okay, sounds good. And I and also answers my question. So this next question which I had was, so you're an IMA graduate, and I recall reading this blog written by you on the imposter syndrome, how you felt that you didn't deserve to be in IIM Ahmedabad, and in fact it was one of your the first pieces of writing by you which I read, and I was like, wow, for this kind of honesty. But could you just touch upon that? What made you feel that you didn't deserve to be in IIM Ahmedabad?
I'll be honest, even today, I don't feel like that. You've just seen my sort of life, right? So it doesn't.
Interrupting you. I have seen your life, and I highly doubt the reasons for you to say something like this, because you've done well, and you have the fact that you say that you like starting up and you like entrepreneurship and you don't like linearity and you like adventure, also being able to handle what you have, which we will cover in the course of the interview. I don't think that there was any imposter in IIM Ahmedabad.
No. I think first I have to be, before we go on why I don't belong, I have to first be grateful for what IIM has given me, right? I mean, I have the opportunity to sit and have this conversation today, and my life took the turns it did. I doubt if any of that would have been possible without the IIM degree, to be honest. Okay? So I think it would be extremely ungrateful of me to not acknowledge that. And the IIM degree, not just as a tag, but also in terms of the sets of friends it gave me, lifelong friends that I have built out of that place, who are a continuous source of inspiration and motivation to me. I mean, to know people who are that talented up close and to see how they conduct their lives is a daily source of inspiration to me. So, so I learn a lot from my peers. So I think I can't take away anything from that piece of the whole experience, right? Having said that, why did I feel like an imposter going in? See, I came from a family of engineer MBAs. My father was an engineer. My brother was an engineer. My brother was IIT, and he was actually IMA. He had actually gone to IMA in 1996. But I was always the rebel of the family. I chose not to do engineering and medicine because I didn't want to. I was not inclined to. So as you can see, that's a pattern, like wanting to do something. Secondly, I was really inclined towards pure science. So when people were doing engineering and medicine, I actually chose to do pure science.
You did an MSc in microbiology.
Yeah. So I chose that. I chose that consciously because I didn't want to do, and at that time in India, you didn't have too many pure science. Like now you have ICER and a bunch of things, right? You didn't have. I actually saw myself going down that path and was very inspired by Kiran Majumdar, I know. And I wanted to be sort of a biotech entrepreneur. And I knew a lot about my own subject. And that's what my passion, it was truly my passion to do that. So IIM happened actually quite accidentally. It was an accident, and I've written about it. It was somewhere along the way in my BSc, just the way it was taught in Bangalore University. So some of my love for pure science began to die, right? Because it was very rote oriented and it wasn't curiosity oriented. There was no inquiry, right? And I was still preparing to do my masters and I was planning to do a bunch of things. But sitting in the lab, I realized it was not my thing. I liked people. I enjoyed being around people, right? That was one realization. The other thing was one of those just before the cat. My brother was working in Bombay. He had come home for Diwali and he said, "What are you going to do with your life?" My brother was 6 years older to me, right? So I was a happy 20-year-old bunking college to go to, movies and all of that. I was in that phase. I was not one of those driven, focused people in terms of ye meko karne ka hai, like. So so I said, okay, I don't know, whatever. He said, oh, you should take cat. I said, okay, bada bhai bol raha hai. So it was actually an accident. It was really an accident. My mother got some Xerox material and then I didn't even start, we actually before that he had told me, I mean, I think you have to apply a couple of months earlier, right? So at that application time, he has told me, no, no, you have to. So I apply and then I forgot about it. Then when he came home for Diwali, he said, how come you're not preparing? I said, I'm not going to get in. Who's going to give me admission? I'm not going to go. So he said, listen, even if it's a trial, you have to prepare. And unless you prepare, how are you going to know? So you have to prepare.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'll prepare. So then I spent the next, 3 or 4 weeks preparing. Right. So when I actually got the call, I was the most shocked because I wasn't expecting to get in. I said, ye kaise ho gaya? And so that happened. So, and I remember my mom telling me, oh, that's a fluke. And that sort of stayed with me. Okay. Huh? So that sort of stayed with me. Those words sort of stayed with me. Matlab, how did you get in? And then my cousin who was a prof was also like, अच्छा मिल गया एक बार फिर से नहीं होगा fluke ले लो. So accidents don't happen twice. So ले लो. So it was just really that I went to IIM because I got admission, not because I wanted to go there. I had no thinking around what it would do for me in terms of my life. And suddenly you're in this place where your best effort is not even moving the needle, because it is just beyond you. It was literally beyond, it was beyond me in ways that I can't even begin to explain. Pehle to, I really, really think freshers should never do an MBA. In hindsight, it's the worst thing for people to do because all of those subjects, all of those are meant for practicing managers, right? And it's only in the hindsight that a lot of those concepts came to me. Only after I started working did the ahas and the bulbs start going off in my head about why what we did was relevant. The thing with IIM in that first term, which I mean, somebody should have told us that, to be honest, I feel really bad about it, is that first term is meant, because it brings in some of the brightest minds in the country, it is meant to kill your ego. It is designed to kill your ego, right? Somebody told me this 15 years later. If they had told me this then, I wouldn't have felt so bad. And but that's okay. I think the purpose of that is to sort of, that whole rigor is meant to teach you work ethic, right? For people like me who didn't have one going in, you get out with a very solid work ethic. So I think it sort of molds and shapes you in ways beyond an education. It just shapes you as a human being.
I want to ask you about your Helios story. In fact, that is one of the primary reasons I have invited you, because I read a very heart-wrenching blog about you getting cheated out of your own company. So if you could tell us about the company, how it started, and what happened.
So a couple of things were happening. I had quit my previous startup about 6 months or a year ago, which was my decor thing. It was a company we had in Thailand. We had shut it down. And I was on
Swell Enterprises?
Swell, yeah. And because I had moved back to India and, there were a bunch of whatever other factors, we had decided that we didn't want to continue the decor business, both of us, my co-founder and I. And I had shut it down. And in that interim period of that 1 year, I had done a bunch of things. I had tried writing a book. I brought it out. That's when I'd met you in at the publishing office as well, right? I spent a lot of time writing. I tried my hands at a couple of little things, and I was really looking to again be like a proper co-founder, a proper company. I wanted to kind of start something, and preferably in healthcare, because I had done other things away from healthcare for a while, and I wanted to kind of go back to healthcare. At the same time, my husband was considering a move out of Pune into Bombay at around that time, right? Uh, it so happened that in one of our parent-teacher meetings, the guy who eventually became my co-founder, who was a co-parent. So how I knew him was he was a co-parent in school. His daughter was 1 year younger to my daughter, but we lived in the same sort of neighborhood. And we were social acquaintances. We didn't really know, we were not friends, but we would sort of connect every time we met in school. We chatted up. They had come home for dinner. We had gone to their house once or twice. They had come home once or twice. And this guy was saying that he had this business idea that he wanted to kind of start something in physiotherapy at home.
Physiotherapy at home services.
Yeah. So it was his idea, really. Okay. And I didn't really think much about it. Once I came home, my husband said, "Hey, why don't you go and talk to him? You know, you've been wanting to do something. Why don't you understand what he's trying to do? And why don't you kind of see if you want to work with him on that?" So the background is this guy he is married into a medical family. So he came from a background of gaming, or he had been a CEO of a couple of gaming companies, and so he didn't have a background in healthcare at all. But the family that he was married into owned a relatively large hospital in Pune in that orthopedic space, right? But he didn't have a background in healthcare, so he didn't really understand healthcare at all. But the family that he came from, or what he was married into, sort of knew that space rather well. So anyway, I went ahead and I knew him socially, so I sort of reached out to him and I said, "Hey, what's this idea that you have, and can we have a chat about it?" So I went ahead and I met with him, and we hit it off. We had never really been friends before that, but it seemed like he would be a nice guy. He was relatively laid back, chilled out. Seemed like a fun person to work with. And so we decided to kind of give it a try in terms of working together for a month. At that point in time, the only thing he had in his head was an idea. There was nothing else there. There was no website, there was no name, no business plan, no business model, nothing. He just had the idea in his head. And in hindsight now, that I think he had probably stewed on that idea for a while and not really moved his butt on it. But essentially, that's what he told people he did, and it was an idea that was waiting to happen. And I was anyway looking to, like I said, do a startup. So I went back. So when I went to him, he had a plan in saying that he would, bring in a certain amount of money. Of course, he said that the family would back him. The family would give him a certain support as well. And I was going to bring in only sweat. So it was not going to be an equal deal. So obviously, he was going to have greater equity, which was fine, right? Because it was not an equal partnership. He was bringing more to the table on paper. But nonetheless, what was also happening in my personal situation was that my husband was looking for a move out of out of Pune. And I wanted to so I went back and I had a conversation. And at that point in time, Ajit was like, "You've been wanting to do stuff for a while. So why don't you start working on Helios? And then we'll see how to make it work," right? So in the beginning, what we did was we decided to do a trial for a month of working together, because we didn't really know each other a lot before. And in that month, we really got on. I enjoyed working with the guy. He was pretty intelligent, although he understood the space of technology better than I did. And I brought healthcare, like he didn't know. So I thought it was a good fit. But in that 1 month, the one thing that I sort of did was I was so focused on impressing him with what I could do. I'd never for a minute stepped back and evaluated him, right? It was more about me wanting to say that I can do this. And at no point did I say, "Okay, can he also, is he worthy of partnership?" I didn't do an equal evaluation. I assumed he was worthy of partnership. I assumed I was unworthy, and I needed to prove that I would be worthy, right? This despite the fact that the biggest business he had ever run in gaming was the same size of the business that I had run in Thailand. right? Despite that, he would keep telling me, oh, I've done this and I was done that, and I would keep getting impressed with that. So anyway, after that 1 month was done, we agreed on the terms. And in the early days, I really didn't ask for much because I didn't know how to negotiate, right? He offered me some 10% of the company, that also in a phased manner. He said we would be co-founders, and that's how the journey began. And even then, I didn't take anything in writing, right? It was a verbal agreement, right? And even then, I trusted him, and I didn't take and even an email summary of our conversation, right? He did give me this after a lot of follow-up. He did eventually give me this 10% car document about 6 months later, and I have the documentation for it. But that was only on paper that he would give. Okay, let me tell you how early I joined the company. Even his company had not been formed when I joined, right? The company formation happened about a few months after I joined. And I was so naive that I didn't ask to be a part of the official company formation at all. The company was formed with him and his wife. And I agreed to have 10% of the company. He had already agreed to give me 10%. But I hadn't consulted a lawyer at that point in time to figure out how would that 10% happen if I'm not part of the company formation. How would I have automatic share? You know? So these are all very basic things that we don't think about as people.
We hesitate to ask.
Or even if we do, we hesitate to ask, right? So he formed the company with him and his wife, and I was like, acha mujhe 10% milega at some point, right? And then his work ethic issues began to emerge, you know. His At that point in time, what had happened was his mother was also critical. His mother was unwell. She was in the last stages of cancer, and somewhere within 2 or 3 months of us starting to work together, his mother passed away, right? So for a long time, because of his mother, he was not coming to work. He would not, like, he would disappear for weeks on end. So for a very long time, I gave him a very long leash because I said, okay, he's lost his mom. You know, it has to be this. You know, he can't. But then I realized over time. So for the first almost 6 months or so, I gave him a very, very long leash because there was always something happening. You know, there was always a reason for him not to show up. Here I was showing up every single day. I was working right from hiring the first team to getting the name right to getting everything. I was sitting and doing and slowly building the organization all by myself. He would show up and then he would disappear. He would show up and he would disappear. And it would be like having to manage a child. Like I would fire him after a month. Then he would show up for a few days. He would show his face around. He would sit around and then again he would disappear. Right? And by then I was already deep in terms of my own commitment, right? Because I had already had this vision of having building this out. So while that part of him had started to show up, I went along with it irrespective, right? So a year into that whole thing, I realized that I was doing pretty much 100% of the work, right? And that he was doing almost nothing from a work perspective. He was still funding it.
Yeah, so you were like an employee rather than a co-founder.
And I made again the other cardinal mistake of telling him upfront that you don't need to give me a salary. Well, I'll be an equity partner, right? So I was not drawing a salary either. So it was a perfect situation for him. उसको पैसे भी नहीं देने, मैं गधे जैसे काम भी कर रही थी, and I was this thing. So a year into that whole thing, we renegotiated our deal, and I told him, listen, I'm doing a lot more than this thing, and you're not really bringing in much effort. So I do think I deserve like 30% of the company, and he agreed, right? So a year into that whole picture, we renegotiated our contract. Again, I didn't get that in writing. I have again, but it came much later. By the way, in all of this time, I still hadn't got the official share in the company. Only conversations are happening, right? So he agreed that, okay, you do, I'll give you 30%, not an issue. Then started as I was building the company, launching it, getting people in, all of that, this guy would show up for a few days, disappear, show up for a few days, disappear, show up for a few days. That pattern became a regular norm. Meanwhile, I kept building the company, growing it, taking it to the next level. And he would still maintain the liaison with the family because after we first had to build the process, we had to do this thing. And the idea that I was given initially was that, oh, family is there. Family is going to get you customers. We have a physiotherapy institute. all the students are going to come from there, you'll have to do nothing, which is obviously never is like
Never is
that.
the case. Yeah.
It is never the case, right? I realized very quickly that the family didn't trust him. They didn't really trust him because, his work ethic was obviously well known to them. So we had to work extra hard to get customers from outside first. We had to work extra hard to hire great physios from outside. We used to go to all the colleges in the vicinity. And from their college, nobody would ever join. We would be like doing campus recruitments, training them, all of that. And we had set up an entire organization that was independent of that hospital. So they never allowed us to actually, till I left, those physios were not part of Helios. And every patient that we had to get out of even that hospital was a slog for us. We had a person posted there in the hospital who would go meet every patient, who would get this thing. And while obviously having them there benefited us in the sense they accounted for about half our customers. They gave us that business very clearly because of the work that I was putting in. Okay? Because it was not an obvious thing that they trusted him too much. Right? But as all this was happening, what was also happening was this contract that we had was just not coming through. We had a verbal contract. Okay. I said it needs to translate into paperwork and I need to actually get shares in the company. Yeah. Right. So at some point after we had renegotiated this 70-30 deal, I started saying, where is the paperwork? And that paperwork was just, I would really lose it. And then he'll say, yeah, I'm talking. He's in general also a dealer guy, right? So a lot of it, I used to say, oh, he's a nice guy, but he's just a dealer, right? I don't believe it was accidental in hindsight. I do believe that at some point, I don't know when, but obviously he didn't start out thinking that he was going to take me for a ride. But at some point in that entire journey there,
he felt he could.
He felt he could, right? He felt he could. Because obviously that's where I hold myself responsible for the nature of signals that I was giving him. That I wanted it badly enough that I would continue without the paperwork, without a salary. And I was enjoying my work so much, building a team so much. The first time I hired a lawyer to even vet my contract was 2.5 years into the company. I mean, that's how stupid I was, right?
This is such a learning, actually. I mean, I feel...
Yeah, so first time I ever hired a lawyer to even get advice on the version of contract that he was offering me was 2.5 years into the company. I should have done it upfront before even engaging with somebody. I really think a contract is the prenup of a co-foundership, right? Whatever it is, it should all be there. It should all be there before you start.
So when did the breaking point happen?
So that's what I'm saying. So about a year before I actually left, I had actually called him out and I had a frank conversation with him. I told him, listen, and he would always on paper say that, listen, our partnership with them is a great local thing, but I want this to be a national. I want this, I want us to build this to be a like Portia. We want it to be a multi-city or a regional or a national thing. And we need to go out and we need to raise money and we need to raise funding. And that's the reason I joined in the first place. That was the initial vision, right? Otherwise, to build a physiotherapy setup for a family is not, why should I waste my time? So it was never the intent to kind of build it to be a local thing. It was always meant to be a multi-city national thing, right? And by which time, so about a year before I left, we had been in the market for 7-8 months and this guy was still not showing up. I had actually consulted a friend of mine who's a pretty renowned prof in the US. And I had told him this situation, like, I love what I do. I see that there's a market for it. But I have an issue with the co-founder. What should I do? So he had actually suggested something. And he had said that, listen, it's a very rare thing that you find that you love what you do and there's a market for it. 2 out of 3 is not bad. As for the co-founder, ask him if he's willing to get a third co-founder. He can still keep a bulk of the equity. He can still keep whatever 40, he can still be a majority holder. But get in a third person who will be willing to work with you to build this out. And that was my thing to him, that I said, this is now already taking up my time 24/7. If we have to take it to the next level, we're going to need another co-founder. So at that point in time, he had said, yeah, when the time comes, I'll consider it. Again, I didn't document it because a lot of times, a lot of us, what we do is we think documentation implies we don't trust the person, right? Right? And in a business deal, irrespective of what your personal equation, if you don't document it, you have no legal ground, right? WhatsApp conversations count for shit. So my big learning is document everything on email. Every conversation, if there's an agreement, put it down on email. Get a lawyer upfront, hire a lawyer on your side, and pay money to the lawyer, because this is all you're putting your sweat equity. It's money at the end of the day, whether or not you're putting cash.
Be the bad guy. I mean, you seem to be someone who's not trusting the opposite person. If they're worthy of your trust, they'll do the paperwork anyway. So you can be the bad guy, I think, which is what women don't want to be.
Yeah. So the thing is, and no, I'm saying is, you got to be cut and dry about some of these things. You have to be very, very pakka, and I was not pakka. I was very lax. Okay. Because he would tell me verbally and I'll say, acha, theek hai, chalo, and I would not document any of this stuff. So that was cardinal mistake. So I made a lot of very, very, very stupid mistakes, right? And for someone who was above 40 already, or around 40 at that point in time, pretty unforgivable. It was not, and someone who had run businesses, right? So it was pretty unforgivable. It was stupid. It was stupid mistakes that I really recommend nobody make, right? Anyway, net, towards the end of 2017, the paperwork was not coming through. And by that time, we were already number one in Pune, 40% a month kind of. Insane growth, systems and processes in place. We were getting to be EBITDA positive. So all the metrics were lining up for us, and I still didn't have any paperwork. I still didn't have anything. And I kept telling him, I said, where is the paperwork? I said, I'm reaching my end point. He said, yeah, I'll get it for you. So, it's like that movie, where he's just not that into you. It's really just that. I mean, at some point you need to know that it's never going to happen, right? And eventually at one point day, and this end is very, very dramatic and I need to talk about it. My dam broke and I left. I said, I'm not coming back. I have quit. I'd put in my papers a few days earlier and I told him, listen, we need to have a third co-founder. And he said, no, I'm sorry. A third co-founder will not happen. Okay. One more thing had happened is that we had expanded into Delhi at some point in 2017. So the trigger for my quitting was in 2018. Despite me saying everything, he decided to roll back from Delhi.
Why?
Right? And because it was a cash burning thing, right? At that point in time, he was putting in most of the money. I had decided to bring in cash. Luckily, I hadn't put in any money yet. But Delhi, obviously, the traction was slower, right? Obviously, in a new market, it's going to take time. But I did an entire detailed analysis and told him that for certain X amount of money in the next 6 months, we will have enough traction. We will have enough traction for the business to sustain itself. It will grow after that or slowly or whatever. We had entered Delhi. So in the first week of Jan, we were all sitting there and we just sort of, we had hired a team. We had about 8 or 10 physios, 7 or 8 physios in Delhi as well. So we basically flew down to Delhi. We called them all in and let them all go in a single day, right? And that was in addition to obviously the difficulty of actually letting an entire team go, it also hit me was that this guy really doesn't have the aspiration to take this to a multi-city thing. It was never going to become that as long as he was involved. So that's when I said, we need to kind of get another co-founder. And he said no, right? I still didn't have any paperwork. So, the paperwork was not coming through as well. So one fine day, I just got really angry and I left. I left the office. The next day when I called up, I was locked out. Yeah. I couldn't go back. Okay.
What do you mean by locked out?
Meaning I was not allowed in. He just said, sorry, you've left. You're done. You can't come back in. Okay. So I had been angry a few times in the past as well. And I was obviously still so attached to that whole thing. Even after walking out, I was like, oh, I want to go back and I want to make it work. For the next 15 days, I kept trying to go back. And he kept saying, sorry, you're done. You can't come back.
And what about the 2.5 years of work? And
so the thing is, that's when I analyzed it in hindsight, it was just that he had figured at some point that he could do this to me, that it was just going to be a matter of time before I would break. And then at that time, the whole company would be his. The entire team that I had built, 40 people of them, stopped talking to me overnight. Right? And I have tried to analyze why that was. And it can only be because he would have told them that don't be in touch with her. And you have to realize from their point of view, they're all people who are earning 15, 20,000 rupees a month. They want to save their jobs, right? They want to have a job at the end of the day. And except
But how long, my question is, how long will this last? You can lock someone who's done the work out and you can stop a hand-built team or a team which you have built from being in touch with you. So how long is it going to last? Because he wasn't doing the work in any case.
So I'll tell you what has happened to them. So what has happened to them now is his wife has taken over. Okay. His brother-in-law is deeply involved. Okay. The wife, in fact, when they first started this company, I had actually asked him, I said, why are you not doing it with your wife? You know, I mean, she was also a marketing professional, just sitting around, not really doing much with her life. And he said, no, she's not interested. This is something that I want to do. And in my mind, in hindsight, I think it was just something that neither of them had the ability to build it out, right? They needed a bakra, and I was a willing bakra. I happened to fall into their lap. I don't think they went out looking for a bakra, but at some point in that game, they figured that, we could get this, and, we could have our cake and eat it too. I had built a very solid organization, right? We had the tech platform running, we had systems, we had processes, we had everything in place, right? We had a head of operations who's still there 5 years down the line, who knew how to do everything. Even if no manager turned up, they would be able to run it on autopilot. I had left it in that condition. So in that condition, it still stays. Okay, they still haven't grown beyond Pune. What they did do, I understand, after I left was they went ahead and they got all the hospital physios onto their roster.
Yeah.
They basically married more. They became far more integrated. With me out of the way, it was now a purely family enterprise, right? So it became far more integrated with the hospital after I left. And I find it very funny. I go back and I see the wife's LinkedIn profile. She calls herself the managing director of that company from a period that she wasn't even there. So it's really that simple. I've realized that a lot of people don't mind free lunches. So it's a lovely free lunch which you're willing to serve. So I was sitting there willing to give a free lunch, and they took it. It was as simple as that. Right?
So how did you cope with this? Because it's a loss and it's sudden. You're not ready to see a person whom you worked with in full trust to behave like this. So how did you cope with this shock, if I can call it?
It was very difficult because for the first few days, I couldn't believe what was happening, right? For the first few days after that, I was like, I really couldn't believe what was happening. But it was something that had been thought through clearly, because it was like, the degree of precision that he had in my exit, he never had while running the business. So it was clearly something that was well orchestrated and well thought through. And so I actually went ahead and met lawyers. I figured what I could do. And while I did have some paperwork, like I had a draft contract for the 30%, I had the initial 10%, I had some email here and there. In general, because I'd been very poor about documenting everything. And I had never asked. So this is a cardinal mistake, right? At no point in time did I say that you owe me a salary, and that if you don't give me equity, you will owe me so much. That was never agreed upon, because I had said, give me so much percentage, but the value for my time on a month-on-month basis from a cash perspective was never established, right? We never discussed it. I never put it down on email. So when I went ahead and I asked him for compensation for my time, he said, oh, the company is very poor. We don't have the money. We can't pay you, right?
Wow.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
4 years down the line, the company is still very much alive and running with no money. I don't know how. And my case legally was very weak because I had not established how much money I could actually ask for. There was no mail trail saying he owes you X or he owes you Y. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So that was going.
It's a big learning for, I think, all entrepreneurs, not just women.
Yeah, that is important. So you need to have all of that. Have your lawyer, basically point being, hire your lawyer when you get into a co-foundership. Have someone have your back for you upfront, right? Don't let it be something that you discover along the way and all of that. So later on, only after it ended, I realized that I had a case, but it was going to be a long shot. It wasn't going to be an easy win. Secondly, I was going to have to compete in, I was going to have to file it in Pune. And in Pune, the unanimous legal opinion or unanimous opinion that I got was there was no way that you're going to kind of take on these big shots. Okay? But essentially, I was told that you will never win. So I dropped the idea of a legal case. Okay. And it was, I won't say it was easy, because also 2 or 3 months later, I also lost my mom immediately after. Right. And at that point in time, 3 or 4 or 5 of my Helios colleagues came and met with me. But this guy didn't even have the decency to message or anything after having spent 3 years working together, not even a WhatsApp message, you know. That was his level of decency. But anyway, net, I essentially cut contact with the company. I stopped keeping track of what they did. And it was in hindsight, that's when I started reflecting on what was it that I can't control the environment. I can't control what he did. I'm not saying that I caused what he did to happen. Of course, he was responsible. But I did feel that I had set myself up in because of being an eager beaver, because of not having my legal rights in place, not asserting myself at the right moments. So that was my biggest learning and my takeaway, that I need to be a better negotiator. I need to kind of and to be a better negotiator, you have to first acknowledge your own value to yourself, right? That's the first step, right? So that was my whole process of sort of getting through that. So my biggest takeaway from that was really about me. It was about how are you going to stop this from happening to you again? What do you need to do differently? And that is when I decided that I wanted to move out of Pune. My husband at that point was already in Bombay. He was already doing a Bombay-Pune commute. And that's the added dimension to this whole thing, right? All the time that this guy was taking me for a ride, my husband was sacrificing family life and staying alone in Bombay so that I could build this company, right? And we as a family were paying that price for this aspiration of mine, which he had no appreciation for at all. So at some level, there was just a lot of taken for granted arrogance, which is unpardonable. I don't think I can ever forgive some of that. But that's the point I said, okay, I need a fresh start. Living in Pune was not doing it for me. I did in that 1 year try a bunch of different things, but it was much too early. I was still not emotionally ready for it. That's when I decided to go back to work for a while, right? That's when I came to Bombay. I looked for work and I went back to work as head of data and insights for a startup. I did that. And after doing that for a year was when I felt ready to be an entrepreneur again, right?
Build my story.
Which is how so when I quit Doxper was when I sort of decided that I'm ready to be an entrepreneur again.
Tell us about Build My Story, as in just a brief intro about what people can reach to you for if they want to work with you.
But as of today, I have customers for two different things. One is leaders in typically founders, entrepreneurs who come to me and ask me to build their story for them, right? They when they want to build an authentic personal brand, they reach out to me and I sort of help them through anecdotes and storytelling. So that is one thing I do. The other thing is Build My Story. A lot of companies reach out to me as well. They can be mature companies that are looking to rebrand themselves after a certain point, or they can be younger companies that are looking to sort of come out in the market for the first time and saying, we need help with building our story. And in this space, there are different types of companies, but the ones that I sort of think that I have my prior experience fits in well with is B2B companies that do work in the B2B space, and typically services companies. Though I would work with any company that's a B2B. Essentially, most unsexy businesses that don't have a marketing mind are the ones that sort of reach out to me because they are the ones who typically sexy businesses already have smart marketers who sort of help them flesh out their own story. It's really the unsexy ones that need help with it, and these are the real companies that reach out to me.
I think this is very up your alley because you're a natural writer. I mean, you're a gifted writer. And I say that because I read what you post in your blog and couchpotato.com. I'll put the link. If you're okay with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Give us 5 learnings for anyone starting their own business.
The first is find your reason to do it, right? For me, I just figured very early on that I enjoyed being in sort of early startup scenarios. It could be the idea that that really ignites you, or it could be maybe that's what you love to do. You love building companies. That's your core thing. But do it for the right reasons. Do it because you really want to. Don't do it because it's cool. Don't do it because of all the wrong reasons. Because being an entrepreneur is very, very hard. Certainly the first few years, it's very lonely and it's very unsexy. The day-to-day grind that you have is very unsexy. So the second, I think from my journey, it should be sort of obvious is make failure your friend. And I think too many of us put a lot of shame around failure. We kind of wrap it up and we try to hide it. And then you never learn from it. You never learn from it if you kind of do that, So, and it's important to be able to look at your own failure critically and say, what do I do differently now? What can I try next time? What can I do differently? So I think for that, you need to be able to embrace it. You need to be able to make it your friend. And you need to be able to, and honestly, the way you recover from your failure is what is going to decide how far you go. Because sometimes you can let failure bog you down, but you shouldn't do that. The third is something I would again say, I really believe in the power of external help. Seek out help, get mentors, get advisors, get a co-founder if you must, if you really, if you find someone with the right chemistry, build a good team if you have the money for it, or if you think don't try to do it everything on your own. Get advice, get support, get help, be part of communities of entrepreneurs where you can share your issues, It's you don't have all the answers, and don't try to have all the answers. So I would say just get lots of help. The fourth advice that I have for people is choose your own definition of success and of scale. I think too often the media seduces to believe that you're only successful if you built a unicorn. That's not true. I think you can choose to define what success means to you, and you can choose to define what scale means to you. These are all very individual definitions. It should fit with your life goals. It should fit with the amount of stress you're willing to take, the amount of, what else you want in your life, the amount of money you really want. So define your own terms, define your definitions for success and for scale. And the fifth is really simple. Don't overthink it. Just do it. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. So don't try to avoid making mistakes or missing and then planning. There's only so much you can plan until you actually jump. Once you jump, every business I've known of always pivots. There's always some sort of major change that you will go through at some point or the other. If you're going to have teams that leave, you're going to have challenges that come your way, you don't have money, all of that is going to happen. So don't sort of try to plan for it sitting on the shore. Just jump in and you'll learn to swim.
Also, what are 5 things you did to rebuild yourself as an individual from the lessons you learned throughout your rich career graph?
I think very clearly the first thing I did was to rebuild my self-esteem, my self-worth. See, low self-worth is very insidious. It kind of works at you in so many different ways. It affects your judgment. It reduces your ability to negotiate. It makes you constantly question your decisions. It creates desperation. It doesn't allow you to walk away from bad situations. So the first and foremost thing is you have to fix your self-worth. So I spent a lot of time working on my imposterism. I can't say that's fully done yet. It's a work in progress. I think that work is lifelong, but nonetheless, it's something that I worked on quite a bit. The next thing I did was, and I think that just came out of the experience itself, but I think I very sharply started focusing and sharpening my nose for people. What do they want out of this situation? Is this person a giver? Is this person a taker? Is this person a matcher? The Adam Grant matrix. How should I interact with them? What do they, is this person going to be an acquaintance? Is this person going to become a friend? So I think there is a lot more reading of people that I do now than I used to. Then the third thing that happens a lot when you have a major setback is it forces you to question everything about yourself. You are no longer, uh, every decision you've made, every aspect of your personality, you put it under the scanner and you say, oh, this is not good, that is not good. Everything becomes sort of negative about yourself. And one of the things that happened for me was after that mandatory phase when you're sort of questioning everything, I actually went down and doubled down on who I really was. So I went back and became kinder. I was a kind person. I became kinder. I tried not to lose my humanity in the whole process. The fourth was actually seeking a lot of help. I went out and recruited help in every form possible. I have had friends standing by me. I've had family who I can hug and cry with. I've had coaches, friends/coaches and coaches, professional coaches who've helped me through situations. I've had therapy, not necessarily in this particular situation, but in life. I've sought therapy as well. I've turned to meditation. So I've sought a lot of help, and that seeking a lot of help is also includes things I do with myself. So a lot of therapeutic activities for me, that is writing. Writing is very therapeutic for me. So I write a lot. Personal journaling, that works for me, and meditation. So really a lot of self-help and help from others. Being quite unembarrassed about saying that I need help and not trying to do everything by myself. So I think that's an important one. And finally, which is kind of counterintuitive to all of this, is really embracing the spotlight. I think one of my big takeaways from not just Helios, but even previously, is that I think this applies to most women and probably most people, is that we wait for too long to kind of start talking about what we do. We wait for perfection. We say, let this become bigger, let this become better, let this become a unicorn, let it become this. We are constantly waiting to kind of start talking about it, because we are thinking that, am I being loud? Am I being boastful? Am I not, so some of that. So I think getting rid of my inhibitions around some of that was very, very important. Also, not only because that's the work I do now, I help people build their brands as well. So it's important that I built mine. But more importantly, it was also the realization that being able to stand up and speak your truth, speak your story, is a very empowering and powerful thing to do. And you don't need to wait to sort of for perfection to kind of be able to do that.
I think it's very important that people share these stories, especially getting cheated like this out of your own company. As you know, I was working with a publishing company, writing entrepreneurship books and stories. And a lot of times people want to post a very rosy picture, as in they want to share a very rosy picture. And sometimes they do speak and they call back some parts of their experiences, and they don't want to share what they go through to make a big company. And I think what you've said today, I mean, I have learned a lot from it as someone who's starting out again, and of course as part of another startup, that paperwork, documentation, how you document, spending money on lawyers, taking care of your rights. I think you've said it all, which really, I mean, these are uncomfortable conversations and women don't want to have them. Women have this issue of appearing, of being nice. They're taught to be nice from a young age. And I think this leads us to a lot of terrible experiences like what you've gone through. So I think that's the most important message of this interview. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Most welcome.
You're watching Not Just Auntie with Suman Addepalli.